Hey, it's Elle. Today we are going to be doing the E tag. So this tag was created by Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. He has a whole series that he's making of tags from A, B, C, D, and now we're on to E. My name is Elle. That is why I was tagged. Let's get into the questions. I'm not going to be answering all of them, so we'll just link questions below, link his original video below. Okay, so the first question is, E is for elephant. What is the longest book or biggest book that you've read this year? So first off, I just wanted to show you guys, I have a tattoo of an elephant on my shoulder. It is not a big elephant, it is a little elephant. Its name is Stanley, in case you were wondering. But what the actual question, the biggest book I read. So for this, I'm going to Goodreads, and it looks like the longest book I've read this year is A Promised Land by Barack Obama. This is his presidential memoir. It's the only one of his memoirs I've read. I have a video that I talk about this book in where I ask what kind of is the point of presidential memoirs, less the details of his book and more just like the concept of presidential memoirs and like what point they serve. And then I think that the second longest book I read, which would be the longest fiction book I read, was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This one I also have a review on and quite enjoyed, thought it was well worth the read. The audiobook was fantastic as well. Let's go on to the next question. E is for English. Who do you consider to be the great English novelist? Okay, so I sort of pay attention to nationality when I'm reading. It's a stat that I log in my Excel spreadsheet where I list all the books I read, try to figure out stats on it, just because I'm a nerd. But as far as like reading books, I don't really pay attention to the author's nationality, like on a specific level with every book I read. I think I have a non-answer to this. I don't know how I feel about the concept of like the great X, the great American novel, the great English novel. I don't think that you can narrow it down to just one, and I think pay at attention, kind of talked about this in his A tag when I asked about the great American novel. I'll link his tags. They're hilarious and so unique, and just how he edits them, the work he must put into them, they're fantastic and super meta. Anyways, what was I talking about? Right. Okay, so I think that this is something that is generational. Like, what are you defining it as? Something that's definitive of a generation or a time and a place? Is it the writing? Is it how prolific they were? And then, obviously, with eras changing, that would change. And, like, there could be a future novelist that has what I think is the greatest thing that came out of a place. So yeah, I don't really have an answer to this because I don't like to think in maybe like superlatives or absolutes. There's not like the greatest this or the greatest that. It's all a matter, it's so subjective and all a matter of personal preference. So there's my non-answer. E is for Elantris. What is your favorite book or series written by Brandon Sanderson? Okay, I have read, as I said before, Warbreaker. And I've also read the Mistborn trilogy, Era 1. And I don't know which one I liked better. I have considered making a video in which I compare and contrast the two because, I don't know, I think it'd be fun content, but I would want to reread Mistborn before I did something like that. I had more overall qualms with Mistborn. There were things about how it was written. There were certain plot points that I didn't like, but because I spent more time with the characters, it kind of moved me a little bit more in my reading experience of the third book. So yeah, I have a non-answer. I liked both for different reasons. E is for experimental. Have you read any experimental books? So again, kind of, I'm going to list specific books, but kind of non-answer. A lot of books are attempting to push boundaries, and in itself is an act of an experiment because you're kind of seeing how people are going to react. It could be I mean, I think you could broaden the definition to be content-wise, plot-wise, thematic content, things like that. But I think that generally when people think about experimental fiction, they're thinking like you're totally changing the structure of what a book looks like. So for that, I have a few, 121 Days. This author is part of the Oulipo, which I'm just going to read what it says. It's a loose gathering of mainly French-speaking writers and mathematicians who seek to create works using constrained writing techniques. So you put a constraint on your style or something you're doing, and then that is like how they write within that constraint, which is a form of an experiment. I didn't pick up on what the constraint was as I was reading this, but I looked it up after, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, I could see where you were going with that. But I think another thing about this that makes it feel more experimental is like there's no plot. I mean, you're getting chapters that don't really like attach to one another all that much. Yeah, so I didn't overtly enjoy this book. The experimental aspects just weren't something that resonated with me. But one that did. Eventually I'm going to get some of you to read this. This is the archive, blah, blah, blah. This is the Archive of Alternate Endings by Lindsay Drager, and it's tied around themes and kind of plot. There's the Halley's Comet that comes every 77 or 78 years, and there's the theme of Hansel and Gretel, brother and sisters. There's also the theme of queer identity, and every time Halley's Comet comes, sometimes we skip it, sometimes we don't. Point is, every time Halley's Comet comes, we meet characters that match that thematic content. So there's no plot. It is tied together by theme. I actually loved this. Just the experiment worked for me. It won't work for everyone, but if you are looking for something experimental, I would highly consider giving this a try. This is not the last time you're going to hear about this book on my channel. So you should maybe read it. E is for ebooks. Do you prefer physical books or ebooks? I am a fan of both. I like the feel of having a physical book in your hand. I have tons of physical books that I want to read, and I like the look of owning them, so I read them mainly in the physical format. But I also like to get ebooks out from my library. I like to read sometimes laying down, and I like just having my Kindle and just it being able to click between pages instead of having to like flip your book back and forth. Or if it's like a thicker or heavier book, I prefer reading it in the ebook format so that I don't have to hold it or I don't have to break the binding. And then it travels way better. I mean, I would say either, but let's look at my stats because I'm a nerd like that. This is interesting because I think that this, as I've started reading more books by listening to the audio, I think that the amount of ebooks I've been reading has been going down. And I've also been trying to read more of the books I own, which is why this is going down. But it looks like so far this year, I have only read 5 books on an ebook, which is 7% of my reading. And I've read 25 books in physical format, which is 34% of my reading. And then the rest is audio at 59%. So it looks like I read physically this year at a rate of 5 times more than I do on like my e-reader. I don't have my 2020 stats on this computer, so I can't give them to you, but that would probably be a bit more holistic to what my actual reading looks like. And I think I was on an ebook kick for a while. That might have been because I bought a new Kindle. I bought the Oasis that's like waterproof and it has warm lighting and it's fancy. E is for exploration. What is your favorite travel book? I don't read like fiction really about travel or nonfiction about travel, like people's experiences traveling. It's not really something that interests me. While I actually do love traveling, so that's kind of where my answer is going. When I travel, I like to use the Lonely Planet pocket guides. This one's for Reykjavik and southern Iceland. I went to Iceland in 2019, and it has like highs that you can, like, exciting things that you can do. It also has like a map in the back. I've read through a lot of travel guides. When I go on a vacation or travel to a new place, I do a lot of research, and the pocket ones have been my favorite, and they're also really nice to travel with. So my library system has pocket books of each of them. This is the only one I think I own, but like I use the Austin one and I use the New Orleans one, I'm fairly sure. So yeah, these are my favorite travel guides. E is for elf. What is your favorite fantasy creature? I don't have enough fantasy reading in my repertoire to really answer this properly. So in the past year, I started playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, with a group of friends, and so far I have played as an elf, and I've played as a gnome. We just did a one-shot where I played a gnome. I mean, in D&D, your race doesn't actually, like, change much about your play. I mean, it helps me create the character. But, yeah, I don't think I have an answer to this. E is for extraterrestrial. What is your favorite book about another world? Okay, I think that, I think I was saying before, I don't really like to talk in superlatives. So, like, this is a book that my favorite in, like, recent memory in the past year, I think would be Paranesi, by Susanna Clarke. The world that she created is just so beautiful. I mean, it was such a short book, but I can really envision everything that was happening. I could see the walls of the place and see the rooms that we were walking through, and quite appreciated that. So I think I'm gonna go with that. I would like to get more science fiction into my repertoire, to be able to answer this question in more of terms of like different planets, not just different world. Last question, E, is for Exodus. What is the most interesting book that you've read about in Exodus? For this, I'm going to answer Exit West. While I didn't totally love the experience of reading this book, it is kind of about people having to, like, people becoming refugees in places and exiting through doors into different parts of the world. So like there's like a black market for looking for doors, and you find a door and it brings you to a new place, and you have no idea what the circumstances are going to be when you get there. Some of it wasn't a metaphor, some of it was like actually what happens, and then some of it was more of a metaphor for the idea of like being a refugee and like there being an exodus of people from a country. I enjoyed those aspects of that book. Anyway, that is all I've got for this video. Thank you, Jim, for tagging me, and for anyone who wants to do this. I'm super awkward about tagging people. I don't like to assume people watch my content, because I have like 60 subscribers, so like there's a good chance they don't. But anyway, if you find these questions interesting and you want to do it, consider yourself tagged. Let me know what you thought of any of the books that I chatted through, and until next time, happy reading.